Hey guys, it's Will with Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Hit that subscribe button if you're already subscribed. Thank you. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for sharing our stuff if you've been doing that. Like I said before in other videos, we've had a lot of shares recently. It's been super cool. So what are we here today to talk about? It is September, which means on Instagram, if you're big into like the martial arts and Hong Kong cinema world, on Instagram, it is Shawtember. So what is Shawtember? Shaw Brothers, or Shaw Studios, was the huge Hong Kong movie studio throughout a lot of the 70s, like late 60s into the 70s, and then into the 80s in Hong Kong. And the Shaw Brothers movies are really like the foundation of like modern kung fu cinema. So every September, people on Instagram use the hashtag Shawtember to celebrate the Shaw Brothers films and like post about Shaw Brothers movies and discuss Shaw Brothers movies and post clips. Or I've become obsessed with this like white dot I found on my black shirt. It's like so obvious on camera. So Shawtember, this is something that I really dig because I love Shaw Brothers movies. And like I think last September I watched about 15 Shaw Brothers movies like throughout the month, and I posted like little updates on like, oh, I watched this one today, and my thoughts on it were this, that, and the third. And so I thought that what I would do is for Shawtember, to celebrate the fact that it's Shawtember, and because I've been actually getting a fair number of people who have been messaging me, leaving comments saying I should do lists, which is something I kind of didn't want to do because I used to work at a website that published basically nothing but lists. I was an editor there, and I would have to edit a ton of lists, and I think it's very hard to do like useful lists or lists that aren't clickbaity or lists that aren't kind of like so subjective, they're not very helpful. But I figured, you know what, it's Shawtember. I love Shaw Brothers. I do like lists and listing things and reading lists. I just kind of have like PTSD experience from working at that website and like having just like, I mean, I would edit like as many as 10 lists a day, and it would be 5 days a week, and I had that job for like 18 months, so I figured the math out there. But so what I'm going to do here is 10 essential Shaw Brothers movies, and I have to say that this is not a definitive list of the absolute best Shaw Brothers movies. I've seen probably like 150 or so Shaw Brothers movies. That may sound like a lot, but there's around 1,000 Shaw Brothers films altogether. And so that's like, what, 10% of them? So that's really not that many. Like if you compare, say, Kurosawa made 30 movies, so that means I would have seen like 3.5 or 4 of his movies. Like I'm really not an expert on the Shaw Brothers. I just really like what I've seen, and I've seen, you know, my share of them. And so this to me is like, of the Shaw Brothers films that I have seen, that I have loved, this is a list of ones that I think would be, like, if you're only going to watch like 10 Shaw Brothers movies, I think this list would give you kind of like a good sense of what those films were, what the history of them is, who the key players were, and like the different kind of flavors of those movies. And so I could do a second list. If people like this list, let me know in the comments. I could do like 10 more essential Shaw Brothers movies or something like that. It really was just like a pretty quick thing of like, I thought of the ones that I loved. I thought of the ones that I think are historically important. I did a tiny bit of Googling just to look up like dates and things like that, and I just went for it. So I'm just going to read you my list, and then I'll be out of your hair. So for me, 10 essential Shaw Brothers films for this 2020 Shawtember. At number 10, I have Black Magic. This was released in 1975, and this is a horror film. Shaw Brothers produced a fair amount of horror films, and a lot of them take place in Southeast Asia, and they are about like witchcraft and black magic and stuff like that. So you have Black Magic 2, Boxer's Omen, what's that movie called with Danny Lee? Oily Maniac, like that kind of stuff, right? And typically, these movies are very grotesque. Like Boxer's Omen and Black Magic 2 are two of the most grotesque, disgusting, like over-the-top, ridiculous body horror films I've ever seen. They're just like ludicrous, like you can't believe what's happening. I didn't want to put those on this list, even though those are probably more well-known than this film, because I wanted this list to be like for general kind of audiences of people who might be interested in these films and don't want to see the kind of stuff that's in those movies that's just like pure gross out fuel. Like I watched Black Magic 2 with a friend of mine who's really into horror. Like he watches way more horror movies than me. He's like, this movie is disgusting. Why are you making me watch this? So Black Magic is a really fun movie. Lole is in it. T Long is in it. I think Lily Lee is in it. Ni Tien might be in it. It's got a lot of like the regulars from the Shaw Brothers films. And the thing that I love about this movie is that it has the structure of a romantic comedy, like a screwball comedy. It's like there's 4 people, and all different people are in love with different people, and they're all trying to get each other to break up with people and fall in love with them, except they're using this witch doctor and like black magic and potions to get them to like fall in love, but in a sinister way, not like in a haha screwball way. It's just a really fun movie. So that's at number 10. Number 9 on my list of essential Shaw Brothers films is Two Champions of Shaolin. This came out in 1980. This is directed by Chang Che, who's probably like the Shaw Brothers director. I would assume that he's the most well-known director. I think he directed the biggest number of their films. He was a mentor to John Woo and a bunch of other people like that. And his films are known for being very male, very bloody, remorseless, and kind of like oriented on like revenge and combat. And so this movie to me is just a great example of like, there's this kind of subset of Shaw Brothers movies that are about revenge, and like it starts with like, I'm gonna get revenge on you, and then they go and do it, and then that person's like, well, I'm gonna get revenge on you, and it, like the revenge just piles up and piles up and piles up, and it just leaves this trail of bodies. And this movie is just like brutally violent. It's so many people die. There's just nonstop fight scenes. There's a lot, like Shaolin is involved and the Wu-Tang is involved and like all these different factions that you know from Shaw Brothers movies. And I don't think it's like if you made a list of the definitive top 10 Shaw Brothers films, I don't think this would be on there. But to me, it stands out as like a great example of a very specific type of Shaw Brothers film that I think like general audiences or whatever could relate to and really like. If you're used to more like Jackie Chan, John Woo, or like samurai films, even that kind of stuff, and you're not used to those old Shaw Brothers films, I think this would be like a good kind of entry point to that kind of genre, that like, or subgenre of Shaw films. So at number 8 on my list of 10 essential Shaw Brothers films for this 2020 Shawtember, I have Legendary Weapons of China. This came out in 1982. It stars Gordon Liu and like a bunch of other regulars from Shaw Brothers films, and it was directed by Lau Kar-leung. So Lau Kar-leung is probably like to more like Jackie Chan kind of oriented Hong Kong cinema fans, you'd know him as the director of Drunken Master 2. He's also a really famous fight choreographer. So one of the things that the Shaw Brothers films are known for are having crazy weapons. And this was like one of their like selling points, is that the villains and heroes, like there's a movie called The Flying Guillotine, which actually almost made my list, where there's like a guillotine, basically it's like a blade and a bag on a chain, and you throw it at someone and it goes over their head, and then you pull it and there's like a blade in it and yanks their head off. It's ridiculous, but like that's the kind of thing that you see in those like ludicrous like Shaw Brothers violent action movies. And this movie is all about just insane, innovative weapons. Like the plot of the movie is a little convoluted. Basically, there's a clan that has like trained itself to be impervious to weapons, and then Westerners come in with guns, and they realize they can't be impervious to guns, or can they? They don't know. They don't think they can. And it's kind of this, it's almost like this kind of Seven Samurai thing of like, you know, like the traditional culture has necessarily, like it's been forced to a point at which it has to die, right? Like in Seven Samurai, if you've seen that film, spoiler alert, I think, if I'm not mistaken, all of the samurai who die are shot. So it's this kind of thing of like a modern era has arrived with modern weapons that takes away the skill needed to be a warrior, and that code of honor of the samurai dies, right? And this is kind of like a similar kind of existential thing of like what happens to our way of life as martial artists and warriors if all of a sudden anyone can just have a gun and blow someone away, right? But the movie itself is just really fun with just crazy, nonstop, insane, over-the-top weaponry, and like the final fight scene is just bananas. And so, like, if you're interested in that kind of like more outlandish, crazy weapons, underground like kung fu societies, like intrigue and like spying on people, like there's a lot of that kind of stuff in there. It's a really fun movie. So at number 7 on my list of 10 essential Shaw Brothers movies, I have Death Duel. This came out in 1977, and this was directed by Chor Yun, who is one of my favorite Shaw Brothers directors personally. Like, he made Black Lizard, which is a movie I absolutely love. He did Bat Without Wings. I think he did The Sentimental Swordsman, maybe. Killer Clans. Like, he's done a lot of like really great movies, and he has a very specific, or tends to have a very specific narrative style in his films, which is that his movies move very fast, and there's a lot of information, and there's typically mysteries involved with the characters. Like, who is that person? They're kind of like bizarre. Where do they come from? Where are they here? And like different characters have different mysteries, and you find different things about them as they go along. And he also has a really interesting way of framing shots, where he incorporates a lot of the set into shots to create atmosphere and like obscure parts of the frame, so it's like frame within a frame kind of framing. And he's a very visually very interesting filmmaker, and also he has a really specific kind of narrative style. So this movie is about this mysterious guy who shows up. It's almost like Yojimbo, but then also like the Clint Eastwood films, right, with like the man with no name. This mysterious warrior guy shows up, I think, at a brothel, and he's just kind of like working there, and then kind of situations develop, and he turns out to be this just like unstoppable killing machine. And then you start to find out about his past, and like it's pretty like bleak, and there's really interesting mystery about who he is and where he comes from and stuff. So But again, one of the reasons I put that on there is I really love that filmmaker, and I think he's very interesting and unique within like the Shaw Brothers stable of filmmakers. So that was number 7. At number 6 on my list of super underrated, or what am I saying, super underrated? My list of essential Shaw Brothers movies for this. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to start crossing stuff off my list so I don't get confused and start reading you the wrong information. So we're at number 6, and number 6 is 8 Diagram Pole Fighter. So it's actually kind of hard to put this movie at 6 because that feels low in a top 10, and this is such a classic movie. I reviewed the 88 Films Blu-ray release of this movie recently, which is over here somewhere. It's this one right here. But Gordon Liu is in this, and it's just like it's got a lot of. Also, I should point out that is I think that was Fu Sheng's last film. So Fu Sheng, also known as Alexander Fu Sheng, and I think Alexander Fu or Sheng, like he has like 3 different names that he was known by at various points throughout his career, and he was a really great actor with the Shaw Brothers. He was a really good comedian. He did like kung fu comedy like in the days before Jackie Chan, but he was also a very good like dramatic actor. And that was his last film because he died tragically very young, and I think it was a motorcycle or a car accident. And so that movie was originally supposed to be about his character, and then his character kind of like disappears partway through the narrative. And then the Gordon Liu character, who you'll know if you're unfamiliar with Shaw Brothers films, Gordon Liu is in like a ton of movies. If you're younger and you watch kind of more like Western movies, Kill Bill, for instance, he plays Johnny Moe in Kill Bill Part 1, and he plays Pai Mei in Kill Bill Part 2. He's like a bald guy, and he's in so many movies. So, I mean, it's just a classic movie of like, you know, this guy is he's in this big family, and the family is kind of like eliminated one by one, or not one by one, but like in this big battle by their rival clan, and he manages to escape, and he ends up living in this monastery, and he wants to become like a Shaolin kind of like warrior trained in the art of pole fighting so that he can get revenge for his family. And so it has a lot of like the staples of the Shaw Brothers films, of like a lot of violence, very bloody violence, the sets, the costumes, the acting styles. There's actually a really great commentary track on that Blu-ray that breaks that movie down a lot. But it's just a classic film, and I think it deserves to be seen by someone who's interested in Shaw Brothers and first checking out their stuff. So that was number 6. At number 5 on my list of essential Shaw Brothers films for this Shawtember, I have 5 Deadly Venoms. Now, chances are, if you've ever heard of only one Shaw Brothers film, it's this one. This is a very famous movie. And this movie was famous not just in Hong Kong, I think, but abroad. Like, if you Google this movie, you can find, like, old newspaper ads from, like, New York City and stuff where this movie was showing in, like, those grindhouse theaters and stuff like that. It was kind of like a hit there. And the setup is pretty simple. Like, there's a master who has 5 pupils. They're the 5 Venoms, and each one of them has a different style. So it's like the toad style, the snake style, the scorpion style. And they kind of end up, they don't know one another because they wear masks. They don't know one another's faces. They don't know one another's names. And then they all scatter, and then they have to all be found. And it's this really good kind of like mystery, and like the good ones versus the bad ones. And there's a lot of great fight scenes in it. And the Venom mob, who are like the actors in that movie, they ended up making a bunch of movies together. Then they became known as the Venom mob because they were in that movie and then in all these other films. And there's like various sequels to this movie and stuff like that. But it's like a really famous, really classic, really fun, like badass Shaw Brothers movie that definitely deserves to be seen. So that was number 5. At number 4 on my list of 10 essential Shaw Brothers movies for this Shawtember, I have The One-Armed Swordsman. So this was directed by Chang Che, again, who I mentioned with 2 Champions of Shaolin. And the reason I have this movie on my list is this came out in 1967. So this is very, very early in the development of this style of filmmaking and of the Shaw Brothers kind of like mass industrial scale filmmaking and all of that stuff. I wrote a couple notes down about this movie that I think are worth pointing out. It was the first movie to make $1 million Hong Kong dollars at the Hong Kong box office. So it was a big hit, and it really helped establish Shaw Brothers and the Shaw template and the Shaw studio and everything like that. And it also is a very violent movie. And in that respect was a game changer too, because Chang Che, like I said, is this very violent style, is this very male-oriented, like aggressive kind of like martial arts-oriented kung fu filmmaking style. And this is almost like ground zero for that. So it was a big movie for not only the Shaw Brothers, but the Hong Kong film industry in general. And I would say probably like martial arts movies kind of more generally speaking. So that is The One-Armed Swordsman. And number 3 on my list of 10 essential Shaw Brothers films, I have King Boxer, also known as Five Fingers of Death. This movie came out in 1972. And this movie actually came out in American theaters before Enter the Dragon. It came out about 6 months before, and it wasn't a huge hit, but it is technically like the first movie in the American like martial arts craze of the 70s that was really ignited by the popularity of Bruce Lee, right? So you can't take that away from Bruce Lee. You can't say that like, oh, this movie would have done it if, we didn't need Enter the Dragon. Like, obviously that's BS. Like, Enter the Dragon is the movie that kicked that whole thing off, and Bruce Lee was the star, right? But and Enter the Dragon made so much more money than this movie. It's ridiculous, right? So like, it's pretty obvious to see. But this movie really was like, it was the first one in the door. And it's just a great example of like kind of an early Shaw Brothers film. And it stars Lole, he was in a ton of their movies. I really like him as an actor because he's a very diverse performer. Like, he plays really sinister bad guy in Black Magic 2. He's also a villain in Black Magic 1, but like less sinister, more kind of like goofy. And then he plays kind of like a badass leading man in this King Boxer. He's done comedy before. Like, he can do all over the place. He plays like this really over the top, like like Fu Manchu sweeping villain in Clan of the White Lotus, which I have over here. So this movie basically is about this guy who he has this technique where like his fists start glowing and he just like destroys people with punches, basically, right? Because he's like the king boxer. And the music from Kill Bill, I'm doing a really bad job doing the music, but you know that music from Kill Bill, right? When it's kill time, that comes from this movie. That's the theme from this film. And it's got some really great fight scenes in it. It's really, like, the narrative is really well done. And so, like, with some Shaw Brothers films, the narrative kind of seems secondary to them wanting to get, like, the stars in it and the fights in it and stuff. And this is actually a really good movie that is also a really great example of a Shaw Brothers film and, like, a martial arts film. So, at number 2 on my list of essential Shaw Brothers films for this 2020 Shawtember, this is a potentially controversial choice because it's not number 1. The movie is Come Drink With Me. Come Drink With Me was released in 1966 and really is like ground zero for Shaw Brothers and like modern martial arts films. Like King Hu, who directed that, he also directed Dragon Inn, Raining in the Mountains, A Touch of Zen. He's like a really well-known filmmaker, and his stuff was extremely influential. And he kind of favored like female stars in the lead, which is obviously really interesting because then you have Chang Cheh in the same period with these really male-dominated type of filmmaking, and the two of them were kind of like opposite sides of the same coin in a way. Chang Cheh's films were much more brutal, and King Hu's films are more kind of like romantic and like poetic, but not in like a abstract art house way. Like, he definitely made like entertaining mainstream kung fu films. He just had a different approach to it, right? But this movie, he very much appreciated Peking opera and like very stylized types of fighting that looked really good on camera. Fluid movements and like kind of the over the top stuff, and like the flowing costumes and things like that, and like stuff you might associate with like a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon type thing, or even with Jackie Chan, right? Because Jackie Chan comes from Peking opera, so does Sammo Hung and people like that. And so his focus on a style of fighting that looked good on camera over a style of fighting that was true to how people actually would fight in real life, I think was hugely influential on martial arts films like throughout all history the world over, as was his narrative style. I have this movie too, like right here. This is the 88 Films release, which I will be reviewing very, very soon, I promise. I know I keep saying that. I'm hesitant to review it because it's such a monumental movie that I feel like I'm not up to the task. Like, I'm getting nervous about it because it really is like, it's like ground zero for like all the modern action and martial arts films that came out of Hong Kong after that. Like, you can't overemphasize the importance of the film, but it's also a really fun, really entertaining movie. So at number 1 on my list of 10 essential Shaw Brothers movies, I have what is my favorite Shaw Brothers film. It is Avenging Eagle. It stars Ti Lung and Fu Sheng and a lot of the other Shaw Brothers regulars, and it came out in 1978. This is my favorite Shaw Brothers movie for a couple reasons. One, it was the first Shaw Brothers movie I saw where you notice that it has a very distinct visual style and that it's doing really interesting things with the form of cinema, the way it moves the camera, places the camera, uses the camera. It's really interesting and really innovative, and it works the camera work into the fight scenes in a way that you very rarely see in Shaw Brothers films, and it's really, really, really cool. The other thing that I love about this movie, it has a really, really great narrative structure where you have this character who's like hell-bent on revenge, and he's going around killing people, and it's really brutal. And then in the, like around the middle, or maybe like a third of the way in or whatever, you have this cutaway section that tells you why he's doing what he's doing and gives you his whole backstory. And then you go back into his narrative and you have a completely different understanding of that character. And the way that narrative is set up, you see how hugely influential Shaw Brothers films were on obviously people like Tarantino, who does that a lot with structure, right? Where he does unexpected things where he'll take like big chunks of structure and break them down into chapters or sections and then like flash forward, flash back, like with Kill Bill. Obviously he does that in a lot of his films. Pulp Fiction is all like discombobulated and out of order and stuff like that, right? This movie does that really, really well. It came out in 1978. So, I mean, for me, my personal feeling is that this was a very innovative film in terms of its narrative, right? So it has really great martial arts. It's like a classic Shaw Brothers revenge movie. It has really great camera work, a great script, a really innovative narrative structure. This movie to me is a great movie. It's not just a great martial arts movie, and I can't say enough good things about it. So that's Avenging Evil. That came out in 1978. My name is Will. This has been 10 Essential Shaw Brothers films. This is a really long video, and I apologize for that. I was going to try to blow through everything, but I get talking about these movies and I get too excited. So let me know what your favorite Shaw Brothers movies are down in the comments below. There's chances are that I haven't seen your favorite Shaw Brothers movie, because like I said, I've seen 10 or 11% of like the total Shaw Brothers films ever made. So like, give me all the recommendations. I want to know. I want to see them all. My name is Will. This has been Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society, and we will see you next time.